Jordan Ellis was 31 years old, a black man with a warm smile and the kind of presence that made people feel at ease the moment he walked over to their table. For the past 3 years, he'd worked as a waiter at the Copper Fork, a high-end restaurant tucked in the heart of downtown Atlanta. Though he held a bachelor's degree in business administration, the job market hadn't been kind, and like so many others, Marcus had to take what he could get. Waiting tables wasn't the dream, but it paid the bills. Even so, he had a reputation, not just for excellent service, but for going above and beyond, always treating coworkers with kindness and respect, no matter who they were. Marcus grew up on the south side of Atlanta, in a working-class family that knew struggle but never gave into it. His father was a construction worker, his mother a nurse. They didn't have much, but what they did have, they taught him to earn with grit, grace, and humility. Those lessons stuck with him, and they showed up in the way he carried himself, even in a job that didn't reflect the degree hanging on his bedroom wall. It was a typical Friday night at the restaurant. The usual weekend crowd buzzed with energy, glasses clinked, conversations hummed, and the air smelled like buttered steak and warm bread. Marcus moved through the room like he always did, quick, confident, efficient. But tonight was going to be different. As he headed toward his section, something caught his eye. A woman in a wheelchair was being guided to one of his tables. She looked to be in her mid-late 40s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that smiled before her mouth did. There was something about her presence, soft but steady, that made Marcus take a second glance. He didn't know why, but he was looking forward to serving her. When he arrived at the table, he noticed she was dining alone. That wasn't unusual, but there was something about her posture, the way her fingers absently traced the edge of the tablecloth, that made him pause. "Good evening, ma'am," he greeted warmly, his voice calm and polished from years of practice. "Welcome to the Copper Fork. My name's Marcus, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The woman looked up slowly, her eyes meeting his with quiet focus. And just for a second, barely a blink, Marcus thought he saw something shift in her expression. A flicker of recognition. But it vanished so fast, he convinced himself he imagined it. "Hello, Marcus," the woman said softly, her voice gentle but steady. "I'd love a glass of white wine, something you'd recommend." He gave a polite nod and headed toward the bar, but that strange feeling lingered. Something about her presence pulled at him, like there was a story behind her calm smile. When he returned with a chilled glass of Chardonnay, she was watching him closely, as if trying to read something in his expression. "Have you had a chance to decide on your dinner?" Marcus asked with a smile. "Or would you like a few more minutes?" "I think I'm ready," she replied. "I'll have the pan-seared scallops, please." As he noted down the order, she added something unexpected. "And Marcus, would you mind sitting with me for a moment? There's something I'd like to talk to you about." The question caught him off guard. It wasn't exactly restaurant policy to sit down with guests, but there was something in her tone, something sincere and serious, that made him pause. He looked around. The other tables were doing fine. No one needed him just yet. "Of course, ma'am," he said, carefully pulling out the chair across from her. "I've got a few minutes." She leaned forward, eyes locked on his face. "I wanted to thank you," she began. "Not just for tonight, but for something you did a long time ago. Something I doubt you even remember." Marcus blinked, his brows drawing together in confusion. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. "Have we met before?" She shook her head, a faint, bittersweet smile curving her lips. "No, we haven't met. But 5 years ago, you changed my life." Marcus tilted his head slightly, unsure what she meant. Without another word, she reached into her purse and pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper. She laid it flat on the table. It was a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local hero saves woman from burning car." Marcus stared at it, stunned. There in the grainy photo, he saw himself, years younger, his face streaked with soot, helping paramedics lift someone onto a stretcher. "This is you, isn't it?" she asked, gently pointing to the image. His breath caught. The memory crashed into him like a wave, the screech of tires, the smell of gasoline, the heat of the fire. He'd been walking home late from the library when the crash happened. He didn't think, he just ran toward the flames, dragged the woman out, and got her clear moments before the car burst into flames. He swallowed hard. "Yeah, that's me," he said quietly. "But how did you know?" Her voice broke slightly as her eyes welled with tears. "Because the woman you pulled from that car was my daughter. Her name is Ava." Marcus leaned back in his chair, completely stunned. The world around them, the laughter, the music, the clinking glasses, suddenly faded into silence. He remembered the accident, every sound, every smell. But he'd never known what happened to the woman he'd pulled from that car. After giving his statement to the police that night, Marcus had gone home, washed off the soot, and tried to let the whole thing fade into the past. A moment of chaos, filed away and left behind. "Ava." He repeated the name slowly, like it didn't quite belong on his tongue. Is she okay?" The woman nodded, brushing a tear from her cheek. "She's alive. Because of you." Marcus let out a quiet breath, but she continued. "She suffered serious injuries, spinal damage that left her paralyzed from the waist down. It was devastating. But she survived. And more than that, she's thriving. She smiled, her voice trembling with both grief and pride. She's a motivational speaker now. She shares her story to help others. She teaches people how to keep going, how to fight. Marcus swallowed hard, a lump tightening in his throat. He'd thought about that night from time to time, wondered if what he'd done had really made a difference. But he'd never imagined this. I don't know what to say, he murmured. I'm just glad I was there. You didn't just help, Marcus, the woman said softly. You gave my daughter a second chance at life. And because of that, you changed the course of our entire family's story. She reached across the table and gently took his hand. My name is Linda. Karen Delgado. The moment she said it, Marcus felt himself being pulled back to that night, like it had just happened. He could still feel the fear in his chest as he'd approached the burning car, the way adrenaline had pushed everything else out of his mind. There'd been no time to think, only act. He hadn't known who she was. He hadn't asked. He never expected anything in return. I've been trying to find you for years, Linda continued. Ava wanted to thank you in person, but we had no way to reach you. The police report only called you a good Samaritan. No name, no number. She smiled through tears. It wasn't until last week, my husband and I were having dinner here, and I looked up and saw you. That face from that old newspaper photo. I knew it was you. Marcus shook his head slowly, stunned. I can't believe you found me, and here of all places. Linda's smile deepened, gentle and certain. Sometimes the universe brings people back together, she said, especially when it matters most. I think you needed to hear this, Linda said gently, just as much as we needed to say it. Marcus sat there in stunned silence as her words settled deep into his chest. A flood of emotions rushed in, pride for what he'd done, humility in the face of her gratitude, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. For years, he'd just been going through the motions, working a job that paid the bills but didn't feed his soul. He had dreams once, but somewhere along the way, they'd gotten buried beneath survival. And now, hearing how his actions had completely changed someone's life, it lit something in him. A spark he didn't even realize had gone out. Linda, he said, his voice steadier now, charged with something new. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. I had no idea. I never imagined that what I did that night could reach so far. Linda squeezed his hand. That's how kindness works, Marcus. We almost never see the full ripple, but it's there, moving through lives in ways we can't always measure. Right then, Marcus knew something had to change. He couldn't keep living like that night never happened. That version of him, the one who ran toward flames for a stranger, he was still in there. It was time to honor that part of himself. I want to meet her, he said suddenly, surprising even himself with the urgency behind the words. If she's open to it, I'd like to hear her story. In her own words. Linda's face lit up, eyes wide with warmth. Oh, Marcus, she'd love that. She's actually giving a speech next week at a local community center. Would you come? He didn't even hesitate. I'd be honored, he said, and meant it. As Marcus stood to return to work, something felt different. Lighter, like a weight had slipped off his shoulders. For the first time in years, he didn't just feel useful, he felt connected. The week that followed was a quiet transformation. He dove into Ava's story, watched every video he could find, listened to her talks about strength, about recovery, about refusing to be defined by pain. The way she smiled through it all, the way she turned tragedy into hope, it moved him more than he expected. He saw in her the same courage he'd forgotten he had, and it made him question everything. Why had he let fear make his choices? Why had he settled for comfort over meaning? Why had he silenced the part of him that once risked everything for someone he didn't even know? Then came the night of her speech, and Marcus sat quietly in the audience, his heart racing with anticipation. As Ava wheeled onto the stage, her presence instantly commanded the room, confident, glowing, with a smile that lit up every corner. This was the woman he'd saved. And now, she was saving others with nothing but her words and her story. Her speech was powerful, honest, brave, and unflinchingly real. She spoke of the night everything changed, of the pain, the uncertainty, and the long road to finding herself again. And then, she spoke of him, of the stranger who pulled her from fire and wreckage, the man she called her guardian angel. Marcus felt emotion swell in his chest. The audience stood when she finished, clapping through tears, moved by the strength and clarity of her voice. After the event, Linda gently introduced Marcus to Ava. The moment was raw, heavy with emotion neither of them tried to hide. Ava reached out, took his hands, and looked up at him through tears. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You gave me a second chance. And every day since, I've tried to earn it. They talked for a long while. And somewhere in that conversation, Marcus felt something shift inside him. Her resilience, her purpose, her refusal to let tragedy define her, it made his own fears feel small by comparison. It made him see how long he'd been stuck. And why. He'd been surviving, not living. And it was time for that to change. In the days that followed, Marcus made a series of bold, irreversible decisions. He gave notice at the restaurant. He enrolled in a firefighter training program. and he started volunteering at a local youth center on weekends, hoping to be the kind of presence he wished he did growing up. That spark Linda had reignited with her story. It had become a full flame, burning with clarity and purpose. But nothing worthwhile comes without cost. His family worried. Firefighting was dangerous, and training meant long hours and part-time income. Money was tight. His body ached from drills. And more than once, Marcus caught himself wondering if he'd made a huge mistake. But every time that doubt crept in, he thought of Ava, of the moment he pulled her from that car, and how one selfless choice had rewritten 2 lives. During training, Marcus found an unlikely mentor, Rick, a seasoned firefighter in his 50s with a gruff voice and a dry sense of humor. Rick saw something in Marcus right away. "You've got the heart for this job, kid," he told him one afternoon after a brutal drill. "But heart alone won't save anyone. You need skill, tactics, and a crew you trust like family." Under Rick's guidance, Marcus pushed harder than he ever had. He learned fire behavior, advanced rescue techniques, emergency med procedures. The physical demands were brutal, but something about it lit him up. He didn't just survive the pressure. He thrived in it. And through it all, his connection with Ava and Linda only deepened. As weeks turned into months, Marcus found himself showing up to more and more of Ava's speeches, not out of obligation, but because her words lit something inside him. She spoke with clarity, strength, and purpose, and every time she mentioned him in her story, it reminded Marcus why he'd chosen this new path. Ava had started using his story as part of her message, how one act of courage from a complete stranger could change the course of someone's life forever. And it was working. Marcus felt it every day. As his training advanced, he also leaned deeper into his role in the community. At the youth center, he started a fire safety program for kids, teaching them not just how to stay safe, but how to think clearly under pressure, how to be brave when it counts. He didn't teach from a textbook, he taught from experience. One afternoon at the center, a quiet boy named Malik approached him. He was maybe 10 years old, soft-spoken, and always sitting in the back of the room. Marcus had noticed him before, watched him absorb everything like a sponge. "Mr. Marcus?" Malik asked shyly, eyes cast down. Do you think I could be a firefighter someday?" Marcus knelt beside him, meeting his gaze. "Absolutely, Malik," he said, without hesitation. "It takes work. It takes heart. But if you want it, really want it, you can make it happen." In that moment, the words weren't just for Malik. They were for Marcus, too. He could hear the difference in his own voice. Just a few months earlier, he hadn't believed that for himself. Back then, he felt stuck, lost in a job he didn't love, wondering if life would ever change. Now, he was chasing something real and helping others believe they could, too. The ripple effect kept spreading. It touched Ava. It touched Linda. It reached Rick, the mentor who refused to let him quit. And now, it was reaching Malik, the next generation. Each of them represented a chapter in Marcus's story. Together, they were the reason he kept going. And now, the day he'd been working toward had finally arrived. The final firefighter examination. The last test before stepping fully into the life he had chosen, a life he had earned. Excitement buzzed beneath the nerves. Months of sweat, struggle, and growth had brought him here. And he was ready.